All right, we're here with Coach Dunnavant, basketball coach today. Trying to hit all the sports, and there's certain truths that are out there for all sports, and one of them is fixing a struggling program. I mean, something could be soccer, baseball, basketball, football. If a team's struggling, there's some key principles that we really feel like you can do to turn your program around. So, glad to have you today, Coach.
Well, I'm glad to be invited to be here, and just in the time that we're in here, just to be able to talk sports and talk coaching with someone else.
Absolutely, yeah. It's nice to have something to talk about during this strange time. Um, but Coach, tell us a little bit about yourself, and people that don't know you that are listening to this. Kind of how you got your start and where you are today, and brag a little bit on your team.
Yeah, I'm the head girls basketball coach at Grissom High School. That's in Huntsville, Alabama. Um, I I'm entering this will be my fifth year at Grissom. We got there. The program had won one postseason game. I tried to go back as far as I could. They had some success in the late '80s and early '90s, but in between about the mid '90s and 2017, when I got there, had won one postseason game and had only won two league games in the 3 or 4 years prior to our arrival there. So it was a program that really was struggling a little bit. It just had not tasted very much success at all. And but I didn't get into coaching until I was a little bit older. I say older, but I was about 20, 25 or so when I finally got into it. I worked for 4 years after I graduated college in sports information. I spent 2 years at Alabama and 2 years at Jacksonville State, and the rigors of the college life were just. And so I got into high school coaching and spent 6 years as an assistant before I became a head coach. And we've had a little bit of success. We got to the Elite Eight in our first year. We went to 3 consecutive regional tournaments, which for us, that's the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. We missed the playoffs this year for the first time. We went through a little bit of a transition, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit later. But when you're trying to fix a struggling program, you fix it. You get it headed in the right direction. But a lot of times you're going to have kids graduate, and then you may have to go back and kind of rebuild your own program. And we're kind of in a situation now where we're kind of rebuilding our own program.
I think that there's a whole nother course that's maintaining a successful program that we could all stand, because I a lot like you had a lot of success in my first year at both schools I was the head football coach of, and they were not very good before, and we got really good pretty quick. So that kind of allowed me to make a little name for myself. It helped me have some good players, but there is, to be
Yeah,
honest,
that always helps.
yeah, I'm not sure that to some degree, to be honest with you, Coach, and we'll get off topic here, but I don't know that it wasn't harder to maintain a certain level of success than it was to go from really bad to really good. Actually, because there's such a hunger when the team's really not been successful, everybody really genuinely wants to do whatever you need to do to try to get better. And after a few years, you do kind of lose that. And there's a whole nother course we could be talking about right now on ways you can kind of maintain that. But for what we're talking about today, most people that watch this or are really a little ultra hype interested in this are going to be guys who just took over a job, maybe even in the last year or two, or they're about to, or so let's talk a lot about what you guys did in that first year or two to go from not winning much at all into the Elite Eight. I think that's a great place to start. So what we did in our course that we're doing on this, we focused on these 5 things that I kind of came up with when I studied places that were not so good and got better. And of course, in my own experiences, we felt like there were 5 things to focus on. Focus on relationships over everything. And honestly, if those 5 points are 100% of the things to focus on, I think that first one's about 80% of it, and the other 4 are 20 combined. But focus on what you have, not what you don't. Focus on the present, not the past. Focus on things you can actually enforce and do, and turn your vision into our plan. So What about the relationships, Coach? What are some things that you guys did at Grissom to focus on relationships to turn that program around?
Yeah, well, when I got there was no booster club, which meant there was no parent support. And there's a lot of things that you learn when you get into coaching. All my years as an assistant, and of course, growing up, I was on coaching boys and playing with guys. And guys, team building is about sitting in the locker room. You joke with one another. Girls really have a hunger for organized team building. I don't know that that's a strength of mine, but I was very intentional in dealing with our girls, in that I needed to get to know them, and I needed to for them to understand that I cared about them as a person more than just what they could do for me as a player. And you don't have to necessarily organize it in a lot of sense. You just need to be intentional with how you do it. Whether it's walking around while the kids are stretching, whether it's during your pre-practice routine, and you just have meaningful conversations about, hey, how'd class go today? If you can carry that over to the next day, and a kid was struggling in their chemistry class, or they're not necessarily getting along with the teacher, but you can come back the next day and say, hey, how'd that go today with Miss So-and-so? Was class a little smoother for you? That you just take care of them as individuals rather than just looking at them as an X or an O and what they can do for you as a player. On top of that, though, I would say, your relationships with the players are obviously important, but the relationship that you're able to build with parents can make or break your program.
Absolutely.
And I said a few moments ago that there was not a booster club when I got to Grissom, because the parent support had eroded so much. They had to give up the operation of their concession stand during games. And we knew we had to fix that. And if we could get the parents on our side, then that would be a really good first step. So the very first meeting I had with the players and the parents, because we got them together in the gym, and introduced myself, and kind of the pitch that I made was that, listen, we need parents to support our team, not because you think it will get your kid extra playing time or earn them favors with me, but because it's the right thing to do that will provide all the kids in our program the best high school experience that we can possibly give them. And it took about a month. That was in July, and we had an open house, and I was in the gym. On open house nights, the parents come and the kids show them around, and they go meet all their teachers. And one of the parents came up to me and said, I've really been thinking a lot about what you said, and I don't really want to do this, but it's the right thing to do. And so we started with one, and that grew into her helping me recruit 2 or 3 more. And by the end of it, we had, I think 6 or 7 parents. For a basketball team, we got an average about 20 kids in our program, 22 kids in our program. And when you get about 6 or 7 that are really gung-ho about it, they started organizing their own team building activities, their own fundraising activities. The program began to kind of take off from there, because now all of a sudden the ownership wasn't just me. The players are going to start buying in. The parents are now bought in. And as you and I and every coach out there listening knows, the parents are going to talk about us at the dinner table. They're going to talk about us on the car ride home. They're going to talk about us in front of their kids. They're probably going to go to church on Sunday and talk about us after the game Friday night. But if you can effectively sell your vision and get the parents on your side, it really cuts down on any negativity that surrounds your program. Now, the kids don't come to practice with that negative energy. And that was a really big, important factor in us being able to just begin to get things moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. What about with the administration, Coach? I kind of got a side question there. How did you build a relationship with your administration? If I remember right, I haven't been in Alabama in a long time, but your school is pretty successful in many other sports, correct?
Yeah, we've had we're on the south end of town, so we're Huntsville, is very space, NASA, Department of DOD oriented there. So we've got some kids that come from good backgrounds with their parents. And we've had success in things like track and cross country and wrestling and
Wow.
and soccer has been really big.
Soccer. I knew soccer. Yeah, I knew.
Yeah,
Soccer.
our boys basketball team though had been pretty good. We're never going to be the type of school that's going to out athlete our opponents, but the coach that was the guy that was the boys basketball coach had moved into an athletic administration assistant principal role at Grissom. And for me, I'd been the head coach at one other place where I had been hired by an athletic director and a principal that I thought was going to be a great fit. And before the school, it was a brand new school. Before the school ever opened, the principal left for another job. And by December, the athletic director had taken another job.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to get a new administration that comes in. You don't always gel, and that was an issue for us at the time. I didn't necessarily have a great relationship with the new administration that came in, and always told myself after that, you got to be aware when you take a job, who are you going to work for, and do you think you can work for them? And at Grissom, knowing that we had a former basketball coach as our assistant principal and athletic director, we had a relationship through coaching against each other before. I really felt like we were going to be able to work together. And I went into the interview process, to me, thinking that I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me. Because I want to find out if this is a place that I'm going to be happy at for a while. And I felt really comfortable in the interview. We talked a couple of times after the interview with our AD and our print were going to support me in everything that I wanted to do. And then after that, it was just about me going in and working hard and showing them that I'm going to do the best job I can for you. And so you do have to be really conscious before you take a job. I think it comes before you take it, not after you take it. You want to put yourself in the best opportunity to be successful, knowing that the people you're going to work for are going to support you.
Amen. We talk about all the time on our stuff about getting coaching jobs. We have a lot of aspiring coaches that seem to be following a lot of this stuff and try to say, don't see getting the job as the end of the journey. See that as the beginning. So many people are chasing a job or that title. The truth is, you should do all the homework before, make sure they want you and make sure you want them. And sometimes, as much as you want that title, it might not be the right fit if they're not going to do X, Y, or Z that you need. So that was really, really good information there for guys who need to hear that. Try to get your ducks in a row with the administration before you take the job. It's trying to fool them into hiring you is actually something that eventually is going to be a negative for them.
That's right. And I would tell anybody that's wanting to be a head coach in that realm, don't take a job because you're just desperate to be a head coach, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
take a job because it's going to be a right fit for you.
Absolutely. So, Coach, you talked a little bit about the challenges that you guys had when you took the job. And, one of the things we talk about is focusing on what you have and not what you don't. And, when I took over a school at Chapel Hill High School in Georgia, they had won 15 and lost 65 in the 8 years that they've been around. And our first year, we won 9 games and had, I think at the time, the first team ever to go. They were 0-10 the year before. We won 9 games. And, we had a ton of good players. It was nothing I did. But one of the things I thought, if somebody asked me, because I get asked that a lot, how did that happen? You guys do differently or whatever. And to me, it was always, I got this advice from somebody, and for some reason it stood out to me, that they had not focused on what they had. They had only focused on what they didn't have. So we had really very average facilities. We had a very average relationship with middle school. We had a lot of financial issues. We had the way they did money made it hard to raise money. There was a lot of things that were problems. And it sounded like all the coaches that came through there just saw those as issues and just banged their head against the wall, because they're good guys. It wasn't they weren't trying, but they were focused on what they didn't have. How come so-and-so has it? Well, the school was really good at track. It was really good at basketball. It was really good at some of the sports that sometimes do translate to football. And so once we kind of just focused on what we had and tried to really not worry so much about that other stuff, I thought that was when it really broke through in that first summer and spring and whatever. But anyway, with that being said, what are some things that you guys did to kind of just focus on what you had when you got there and try not to focus on the challenges at hand always?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge that all coaches go through at some point, and you just got to put your head down and be a problem solver. You know, here
Right.
if you're trying to compare yourself to what other people have, it's going to take your joy away. And I think a lot of us get into coaching because we enjoy it. We
Right.
enjoy the kids. We enjoy the competition. So don't try to compare what you have, your situation, to someone else's situation. Just make the best of the situation that you got. You know, I went to work every day, um, just happy that I had a job, happy that I had an opportunity to be a head coach, to follow my dream, to do what I wanted to do. But I also said, I'm going to do it my way. And I'd been preparing for that for a long time. And I would tell myself this: if we're going to fail, we're going to fail doing it the way that I'm going to be happy with.
Right.
And it really motivated me. I'm just to keep working, just to keep working, just to keep working. And eventually, you know, it didn't happen right off, but eventually, when you just put your head down, you go to work every day, you plan practice, you plan the work, and you work the plan, not worrying about what other people are saying, not worrying about what other people have that you don't have. Eventually, things are going to work out.
Right.
And we were able to do that just because we focused on ourselves. You know, a lot of film study, a lot of focusing on the kids in here's where we are, but here's where we want to get to. Now, I mentioned being a problem solver. Okay, how do we get there?
Mm-hmm.
And that may be different for someone else's situation than in my situation and to the next one. But we've all got to be problem solvers and ask ourselves, all right, here's where we are, here's where we want to be. Now we got to come up with a plan to how we get there and then work it. But don't change your plan. Don't change the direction that you're going in midstream because it shows weakness. And we had an opportunity. We lost 14 of our first 16 games that first year that I was there. And yet we just kept the process going. We kept doing what we were doing. We pointed out the positives to our kids. You go into film study on a Wednesday after a Tuesday game, and you sit down and instead of focusing on here's what we did wrong, here's what you're not doing well, we focused on here's what you did a good job of. Here's how we're getting better.
That's right.
And eventually the kids, you know, when you keep the kids positive, they continue to fight, they continue to play hard, and eventually it all started to pay off for us when it really mattered.
Yeah, that's a great note for people listening. If you're taking notes, you need to write that one down. The film study, focus on what the kid did well. I mean, you know, I've heard Bill Belichick speak, and he's not a dynamic speaker. I know you guys know that, but he did say, you know, something they do with the Patriots, and I've heard everybody reiterate this. They do not come into the room and talk about what somebody can't do. They just try to cater whatever they're doing to what they can do. You know, and that's such good advice. You know. And even in the NFL, it's an issue. It definitely is for us. So the next step for us is to focus on the present, not the past. And that kind of meant two things to me. You know, the first thing was, especially in football, you get these guys come in and all they want to do is run down the previous staff. You know, you guys were done before. That's why you lost every game, and now do it my way. You know, that doesn't work. That's dumb. I wouldn't do that. It doesn't bring anything positive to the table. But I think the other thing, focusing on the present, is just having a sense of urgency. If you guys want to turn this thing around, you're going to have some urgency in the program among the coaches, the staff. Most head coaches got a little sense of urgency, but you got to translate it into the players. So what did you guys do, you and your staff, to instill a sense of urgency in your program?
Well, I felt like knowledge of the game was really important, and not only for our players, but for our parents, our fans, our community, and stakeholders. So I kind of took it upon myself to. I know a lot of coaches don't like to discuss basketball or in some cases football X's and O's with parents. I won't talk about X's and O's with parents. I did feel like we needed to educate them on how we played though, because our style of play is a little bit different. It's kind of old school, and it takes a little bit of time for the kids to master. What I didn't want is I really knew that we would go in there and lose some games early because the kids are learning what we're trying to teach them. In basketball, we have that luxury. We can do that because of football. But I felt like we need to educate our parents so that they would understand it.
Absolutely.
And so we did it. We did that through some just through parent meetings. We talked about how we were going to educate and coach the entire player, not just the physical side of it, but the mental side as well. To help them understand what we were doing. I sent weekly emails home. That sounds very elementary in a way, but I felt like it was necessary at the time. I'm 4 years into my program. I don't do that anymore. I did year one. Right. When we came back to school with the kids, though, the kids had notebooks. I created notebooks for them. They kept them in their lockers. We had at our locker room, we were able to watch film in our locker room. So the notebooks stayed there. And at the beginning of every film session, there was a teaching session that went along with it. This is what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to accomplish it. It could have been character development as well. Whatever issue I felt like was important to the development of the mental side of the player, we would address that at the beginning of our film studies. And then we went into film study, and then we went on to practice on the court. So we really just tried to isolate ourselves to focus on where we are as a team and not on what has been the experience here the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And what really helped turn it around was when we beat our rival. We played Huntsville for the first time. We played them twice a year. We played them the first time in mid-December. Huntsville had won 12 in a row in the series, and we beat them at home. And you could really see at that point the kids, okay, what we're doing is starting to work. But it was just a focus on what are we doing? And I mentioned earlier, here's where we are, here's where we want to get, how do we get there? But you got to develop the entire kid, not just the physical athlete. You got to work on the mental side of it. And we spent a lot of time developing the mental side of how we approached practice and games.
Well, I think that I've got a couple of friends who are head girls basketball coaches, and I just know that coaching girls is totally different than coaching guys.
Yeah.
And there's some positives and there's some negatives, but I think that what you guys do in that particular aspect, like earlier, I know you said you got to kind of be organized with your team building a little more than you do with the guys. And that's so true, by the way. I've heard the same thing from so many other people. I think when we get into rules, maybe that's kind of one of the things that might be a little different too. With the boys sports, we had to kind of have our thumb on them a little more, I think, on the rules side of it. But football coaches in general can come up with 100 rules and they can't enforce.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that when these people are meeting you for the first time or the first year or two, that if you say we're not going to be late to practice, then you make sure you enforce people being late to practice. And so if that's your big thing, make that your big thing. But don't have 100 big things. You can't enforce all of them. What are some different policies or rules or procedures or anything that you thought was kind of that you put in at Grissom that you thought was different than what you did before that helped you?
Yeah, we don't have a ton of rules in our program. I know that our football coaches and our boys basketball coaches that will have out give the kids grade sheets to take around, teachers to fill out and they report back. We don't do a ton of that with the girls. Grades haven't been a big problem for us. What we decided to do instead of making rules like that is, and I stole this now, Don Meyer always talked about you got to get all the good ideas, but you can't use all the good ideas. This is an idea that
so true.
Yeah, this is not aware of who Don Meyer Don Meyer was the boys basketball coach at Lipscomb University for a long time. And then he finished his career up at Northern State in Aberdeen. I guess that's South Dakota, I believe. But he put together something that I kind of took, and then we changed it a little bit to fit our school. But there were 3 parts to it. It's what do you have to do to be here? 4 or 5 things that are underneath that. And then we teach our kids, okay, what do you have to do to stay here, meaning stay on our team? What does it take to be on the team? What does it take to stay on the team? And then here's what it takes for us to win. And there's so many kids that just want to be a part of something. But yet we're looking for the kind of kids that not only want to be a part of something, but that want to be successful at it and want to win at it. And there's a really being on the team and a part of the team and being a part of a winning team. And so we teach our kids what it really takes. And for us, that really comes down to the little things. It's when we say practice starts at 2:30, we mean practice starts at 2:30. It doesn't mean you're coming out of the locker room at 2:30. It means having your shirts tucked in when you come out of the locker room. That means being prepared mentally for practice, not just present physically, but being there mentally, because if you're absent mentally, you're missing the teaching and the game planning that's going on. So, and we stretch it into what we do in the school too, in the classroom, sitting in the front of the class, just some normal things that I think we all expect out of our kids. But we put a big emphasis on the differentiation between just being on the team and making our team a winning program.
Absolutely. That's spot on. And what I love about these topics that we've kind of chosen in this series is so applicable for boys and girls sports, for different type of sports, for big school, small school, for different parts of the country. Some of that stuff is so true. It doesn't matter what your situation is. That's true. Now, if we start talking about what offense or defense you guys run, or what kind of camps you go to, or what, there's certain things that we'll talk about that might be different per sport, or for boys and girls, or for even in Alabama versus Michigan. But all the things you just said, Coach, that's going to always be true. Doesn't matter if it's lacrosse, soccer, in New York City, or Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
So spot on there. What did you guys do? My big thing was talking about, you go into the interview, you're trying to get the job. Basically, your goal in the interview is to have a vision and to sell them on your vision. It's your vision. You're saying, bring me in here. I can fix this. I've got this plan and all that. And then if they offer you the job and you accept it, that I and me and my and all that has to turn into our plan. It has to be our vision. And I always say, I knew we had some good things going on when I would hear kids and assistant coaches that hadn't worked with me before start saying a lot of the same stuff I was saying, or if I said something a certain way, if I called something this, they called it this. And that's when I knew we were really moving forward. And so what did you guys do to turn it around? Because here's another thing before you answer that. I don't like to talk about folks being bad coaches. I think when a place was struggling, it wasn't like the old coach wasn't trying. We're not trying to downgrade the folks who were the coaches of the teams that were struggling. I mean, a lot of times you work just as hard to lose every game as you did to win every game. It's just that it wasn't working for whatever reason. And so what did you think you guys did to make it work?
That it helped for us that when I got in there, I think we did have some talented kids of that group. That group is all that graduated now. Only one of them went on to play college basketball. So it wasn't like we were overwhelmed with great talent, but we did have a group that was, one, they were very intelligent and they were hungry. They were hungry to be coached well. And they were very respectful in how they responded to myself and my coaches. And I think they were intelligent about it as well. So you put a lot of that together when you've got intelligent kids in and are open to being coached. It's a really good recipe. That wasn't me. That was there when I got there. Whether that was that's probably more of a byproduct of their parents than anything else.
Right.
What we were able to do is kind of try to take that and slow things down and explain the why. Why are we doing it this way? And when I talk about the why, our X's and O's, why are we doing this? Trying to do it this way. I think that's a change in kids now than maybe it was 15, 20 years ago. I remember when I played, I didn't really care about the why. If my coach told me to do this, I was going to do it because my coach told me to do it. Kids nowadays, to me, feel like maybe they need to see the inroad. Why are we doing it the way we're doing it? If you can communicate that to them effectively, and they understand it, the notebooks came in handy. They were able to write things down. And then we were able to go back to it. Say in February, we were able to go back to something that we taught in November. And it was there for them. It helps the teaching process a little bit. It's a hard thing to explain necessarily why things work for some coaches and in places. And, you see a lot of coaches do the exact same thing in one place that they did in the other, and they don't quite get the success. They can't replicate it. So it's kind of hard to put your thumb on it. But likewise, what you said, say the terminology that we teach. And when they started to use that terminology in teaching each other and on the bench and in practice, then you really knew you had a team that was together. And that's when good things started to happen.
Absolutely. Well, obviously you've done a good job there, but all of us have made mistakes, and I'm a big fan of mistakes because I think I learned a lot more from losing than I did winning. I think I've learned a lot more from messing things up than getting them right. So what's something you kind of regret during the process? What's something that you feel like we should have done differently that somebody else can learn from?
I think I took for granted, and this, I think you have to move forward in this, and this may go into one of the other courses that you talked about. I took for granted that when the core nucleus of the group that I graduated, I took for granted that culture would remain. And I think we're going through a process. We kind of began it as soon as our season ended this year. We kind of began that process of doing some backtracking, some cleanup work. I've gone back and looked at some of my notes from when I first got the job and what I did, and we're reinstituting some of those to build the culture that we built with a completely new set of kids. We got kids now who come in and they think they're entitled to win because the group in front of them won. But the group in front of them weren't that way because the group in front of them had never had a group ahead of them that modeled what winning is like. We had to teach it to them. And, so when you talk about maintaining the program, I think that's one of the biggest regret lacks in year 4 or so in trying to maintain the program or reestablish that culture with a completely new group of kids.
Well, that's something. There's a winning culture that has to establish, and there's going to be some ups and downs. Unless you're one of the 1%, you're going to have some ups and downs in your program. But there is a culture that maintains, and with culture, it's kind of like the garden. You have to work on it every day. And it's just such a hard thing to maintain. But Coach, I really appreciate you. You've been brought in some good knowledge today, and girls basketball is just such a growing game. I love watching girls basketball because I got some friends that are a part of it, and I really respect what you guys do. We always ask this toward the end of about everything, but what advice do you have for somebody that wants to be in a job like yours? Say there's a young coach out there who wants to be the head girls coach at a big school like Grissom. What advice do you have for them on what they can do now to eventually get to where you are?
Yeah, if we're talking to assistant coaches here that want to become a head coach, the biggest thing is I'd tell you to go back to your job, to your school, and do everything you can to make your head coach's job easier on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Finding good assistant coaches is extremely hard, and getting a head. There aren't very many head jobs out there.
Right.
If you wanna become a head coach, you need to show your head coach that you're going to work your butt off, because you may need his reference to help you get the job, and in that process, study. Keep a notebook. What are the things that the program you're working for now are doing that you really like? Think that your program's doing now that you don't like, that you maybe wouldn't want to implement into your program. But more than anything is be the best assistant coach you can be, and make your head coach's job easier. Be the type of assistant coach that you would like to work for you.
Right.
And
great advice.
That to me, that's the biggest thing, because if you work your butt off, someone's going to give you an opportunity because they've seen your hard work behind the scenes, or your head coach has stood up for you and is going to help you get that job. But take I don't want to say a lazy approach to it, but you don't give 100% of your effort in everything that you do, you can't really expect anybody to give you an opportunity either.
Absolutely. I mean, the best advice you can get is to do good at your school. We try to say there's not a right answer to a lot of these questions, but the truth is that's the right answer to that one. If you're an assistant coach, you're the best assistant coach you can be. And I probably have never said it like you just did, but I'm going to steal that from you. You need to be the assistant coach you would want on your staff when you do get the head job. That's a great way to look at it. So, Coach, I appreciate you. And maybe if I ever get over to Huntsville, I'll come check you guys out sometime. Watch you play.
Yeah, come on, and we'd love to have you. And same here. If I get back over to Georgia.
Yeah, you get over this way.
Area.
Another guy that went to Alabama. You must be a nice guy. So I knew I liked it.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, buddy. I'll see you.
Okay, thank you.